It's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today. Kim Baker is an HR consultant and owner of Baker HR Services. She helps companies reach their dreams by providing human resources expertise, advice, and tools with practical common sense approach. Baker HR Services works with companies that have either no HR or not enough HR services and are often working to get to the next level in their business on an as-needed basis. Kim is a proud chamber member, and we also thank her so much for helping the chamber as an ambassador. She's got more than 20 years of HR expertise, and we're so happy to have her present this topic to us today. So I will turn it over to Kim, and I will be over here managing the chat box for anybody who has questions.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Barbie and Paige and the Chamber for the opportunity to share with our members today. I'm so honored to do so, and I know everybody has been so grateful to the Chamber during these trying times with COVID-19 and all the valuable information you've put out there and timely information. So kudos to being so great at your job and what you're doing, and thank you for your continued support of business in this critical time. All right, so today we're going to talk about moving your business forward in COVID-19. We are speaking to the business owner and managers from that perspective. So keep that in mind as we go through these items today. Today's topics are employee communication, reluctant returners, engaging and reconnecting with your staff, options for bringing back employees, recruiting in COVID-19, and other compliance considerations. So first, we're going to talk about employee communication. We're going to talk about two different kinds, business plan communications as well as employee care communications. So from a business plan perspective, it's very important that you communicate often, daily if you can, weekly at a minimum. And you also want to share the financial status of the company. This is always a best practice from a business owner so that your employees know what's going on and where you're going. But it is so much more critical now today due to COVID-19 and the challenges so many businesses are facing. In addition to employees being concerned about their own well-being and their own financial well-being, they're concerned about your company making it. And so it's very important to share that information with your team so that they can have the best information and support you during this time. You also want to share their challenges you're facing, because everyone is having challenges right now, and how you plan to meet them. They need to know not only do you have challenges, but you thought through, you have a plan. We realize that your plan may change, it may be fluid, but make sure you let them know and share updates when necessary on your plan, and that'll help to ease their tensions. Also, you want to share tentative timeframes. With the reopening of North Carolina, some of those requirements and the guidance that you are getting yourself as a business owner is tentative, but you share, we are asking and are suggesting that you provide the most up-to-date information that you have and provide updates as well. People need to know when. It's not enough that they know that you have a plan and you're working on it, but if you have a tentative date to reopen or you're scaling your company little by little and that sort of thing, you need to communicate timelines so they can plan their life and their family to meet those needs. Another point to remember is that you want to communicate honestly. Your team trusts you and with their livelihood, and you need to make sure that you're honest, but you also want to provide some reassurance. As a business owner myself and many business owners we work with, these are challenging times, and there are some days that are not so good. And so you want to make sure that you also provide that reassurance, because they're looking for leadership right now, and that reassurance will help them to rally behind you to continue to support your business. Another item that you want to share on a regular basis as often as possible daily or at least weekly is the safety protocols you have in place to keep them safe, keep your clients safe, make sure that they understand them and they feel supported in this time, that you guys are doing everything you can to make sure that they are safe. We're going to talk a little about that a little bit later in the presentation, a little bit more detail, but wanted to touch on that as well now. So why is this important? I don't know if you've realized, but many employees have a wild and vivid imagination. And so in the absence of providing accurate information, up-to-date information, sometimes they will imagine the worst, and certainly will be inaccurate. So any reality that you're facing as a business owner, which could be tough right now, is better than letting them wildly make up something in their head about some doom and gloom that could be on the horizon. So it's very important to share that information so that is accurate and they can make the best decision with real information instead of imagined concerns. Frequent communication really eases fears. I know that a lot of businesses are challenged right now, and they may be all hands on deck trying to save their business and get them through this difficult time. It's very important that you take time out to communicate with your team to ease their fears. If they're hearing from you regularly, again, they're not imagining things. If you're total silence, radio silence, that again makes them be concerned and maybe not quite as loyal because they feel like information is not being shared. As you know, this is a critical time of crisis for many people, and fear abounds in this time for people's health, their financial, and their safety. So again, these are the business reasons why you need to be sharing this information to help your team to get on board and move forward with your business. The next item is employee care communication. We recommend that you show your appreciation verbally on a regular basis, and again, encourage them that we're going to get through this together. Unfortunately, most business owners, they have a team because they can't do it themselves. So it's important to take that time out and do that reassurance so that your extension of your business will again be focused and be able to rally behind your efforts to take your business through this time. You also want to share with them that you realize that they have their own decisions to make and their own commitments, so that you will provide advance notice of any changes as soon as you have that available information. Again, but you want to be honest, and you don't want to overpromise. Never promise something that you can't keep. Provide the best information that you can. Also, we want to remind you as well that it's okay to say we have no new updates and reiterate the last update. We're seeing lots of employers do some great things, like having a standing meeting every day where they provide an update, even if that is to say we have no new updates. And then how are you doing and what questions can we answer for you? That's a great practice so that people feel comfortable, that you are accessible, and that they have the latest information, and that there isn't a delay in providing an update for an unknown reason that they're not aware of. Also, you want to share about people's performance regularly. This is more important than possibly normally. Maybe they're not used to getting performance updates on a regular basis, and maybe it's not even required. Maybe your people are pretty confident that they are needed, wanted within your organization, but you find that people are a little bit more insecure at this time, so it's more important than ever to tell people they're doing a good job. Also help them to overcome obstacles and give them suggestions to improve. You just don't want people to, again, be imagining things because they're just feeling insecure, and they know lots of people have lost their jobs. So why is this important? Again, there are really important business reasons for this. People are stressed and they need reassurance. Again, what people are going through now, they may have never experienced. The amount of job loss that people are seeing, that people they know and businesses struggling, is something that they may have never seen before. So it's very important to know that job loss is their top priority right now. Many people are working on a plan B If they don't have information that your business is doing okay or you have a good plan, that may be hedging their bets. They may be interviewing, they may be looking at other positions, and maybe moving on to a company that possibly is communicating better their security. So make sure you take that time to provide that update to help them to feel secure in their job and that you're looking out for them. So providing information, again, will help them to make the best decision that they can, realizing everybody needs information, everybody has their own unique information, each family may be impacted differently, and so providing this timely information will help them to come to a good decision. Hopefully will help them to take action in this time where most people don't feel like they are in control. It's more important than ever that you give them information that they can take little steps of action that will make them feel more at ease that I'm taking action and I have as much control as I can in this difficult time. One thing that to keep in mind is infrequent updates are often perceived as withholding information. And I know many business owners who are super busy doing things in their business to keep their business afloat so they can continue to employ their employees. However, taking that time and doing it regularly, providing the best information is what's going to, again, help your employees to calm down, to focus, and not be distracted. And then oftentimes they do think that you're withholding information. I find lots of leaders that I've worked with sometimes delay giving information because they want to have the most accurate information. And in this time of COVID-19, as you know, it's very fluid and we're not going to have all the answers. And even when we think we have all the answers, they change the answers, right? So it's perfectly okay to say, this is our update today. As you realize, things can change and we'll let you know as soon as we have an update that is different and that we're committed to working through this together. All right, the next topic is reluctant returners. What to do with these people, right? We're going to talk about several different kinds of returners that are reluctant. We have the fearful employee, the COVID-19 reasons, childcare issues, and people who may want to stay on unemployment. So first, the fearful employee. We're telling our clients that you want to make sure that you have an interactive conversation and really dig deeper into why this person may be fearful. If your employee is coming to you saying that they're fearful, they're not always as transparent as they need to be with you as to the reason why. We've had some clients say that my employee is fearful to come to work because they're worried that they might get something, and it turned out later that they were exposed to COVID-19. That would have been great information to have at the time when they're making a decision. So you need to take some time and go through and ask them specific questions. Educate them about COVID-19. Do they have symptoms? Have they been exposed to someone who has had symptoms or who has been diagnosed? Are there other reasons maybe why they are fearful? Another thing to do is to help ease their fears is to share your detailed safety protocols and assure them they're using the best practices. As an employer, you need to be looking out there for your industry, what OSHA says, what the CDC says about how to protect your employees and your clients and having a written plan. So share that with them, and that may reassure them as well and make them feel more comfortable to come back to work. You also want to consider, are there any dangers in particular that this employee is concerned about that maybe you could strengthen? So having the conversation and say, is there anything in particular about your job or what you do for us that you're concerned about? What can we do better? And then you can be able to explain to them why what you've put in place is sufficient or how you can strengthen that. Another thing to keep in mind as an employer is you want to consider creative options on getting your people back to work. With all the legislation that is out there, all the frequently asked questions seem to lean towards being flexible with your employees. and thinking outside the box. So we're encouraging our clients to do that as well. So can you do something like isolate this person? Maybe they're concerned about being exposed to the public. Can you make are much of their duties not required to be with the public? Can you set them aside to a room that doesn't interact with the public? Can they work remotely? Could they work different off hours? What can you do to help make this person feel more comfortable and still work for your organization and contribute? One thing to keep in mind is that you're not required to pay employees who are just fearful without a COVID-19 reason. And they're also not eligible for unemployment. This has been written out numerous times on the government websites in addressing these issues. But what we're encouraging our employers to do is to think through, what can you do? What can you do for this employee? Would you like to extend to them unpaid leave of absence? Is that an option for you? Do they have available PTO that they could use? Everyone is coming from a different point of view. Everyone feels different about returning to work. Some people are more fearful, some people are not. So make sure that you don't dismiss those fears and see what you can do for them. Can they borrow against future PTO? What have you done before for special circumstances that were related to health or different situations that you can extend to them? One thing, though, that you need to consider is if you do this for one employee, another employee and another employee may come and ask for the same thing. What is your bandwidth, and can you do this for all? If you're unable to do it for all, it could be considered discriminatory. Someone could be upset that you didn't grant it for them, and you may have had a very valid reason for that. But you need to understand these are stressful times, lawsuits are going to happen, and you need to make sure that you consider the bandwidth and that if you can actually do this for several employees and still continue to work and manage your business. All right. Now let's explore reluctant returners when it comes to COVID-19 reasons. There are several reasons for COVID-19 that offer protections for your employees, and there has been an act that has come out as far as paid leave that we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, but we're going to touch on it now. So if someone has been in contact with someone who has COVID-19, it's recommended that they quarantine. Also, you want to share with your staff the symptoms of COVID-19 and specifically ask them if they have any of those symptoms. Also, you want to check with them if they're under a doctor's care and they have been recommended that they self-quarantine because they're high risk, or someone in their care has been recommended that they self-quarantine due to high risk. You don't want to compel these employees to return to work without a doctor's release. So even if they're willing to come back, we recommend that you get a doctor's release so that you can protect your team, protect your clients, and use those best practices. If someone says to you that they are at risk and have an underlying condition, you are not permitted to ask them what that condition is. As an employer, you don't need that information in order to extend them leave. So that's important to remember. The CDC and the health professionals have granted and have ruled that COVID-19 is a real threat to the public. And so that's why you can asked some of these questions to your employees, maybe where you couldn't maybe before. So they've made a special exceptions and have outlined these types of questions that we're sharing with you today. Also, we know many employers are very concerned about their staff and have their best interest at heart. And they may perceive someone that on their staff may be at risk as being more eligible or high risk to get COVID-19, but your employee hasn't shared that with them, and they haven't seen a doctor saying that they are under a doctor's care and they are high risk. So maybe you have an employee who is pregnant, or you have an employee that is older. You can't require that person to stay home. That's discriminatory. And I've heard of employers doing that and probably just being well-meaning, trying to care for their employee or mitigate risk from the business. That is not acceptable. So you need to be very careful with that. What we're recommending to our clients is that you share with your whole team, instead of singling out this one person that you're worried about, is that you share with your whole team the different things that you have in place to allow people to take the time they need to be safe if they are at risk. And talk about the paid leave programs that you have within your organization. You can talk about the paid leave acts that are required of you as a company that to help support them during that time. So making sure that they know the safety protocols, how they can get paid, partial payment during that time, and help them to feel supported enough to make that decision to say, I am going to consult my doctor. I might be high risk. Maybe I need to stay home. But with the absence of you sharing that information on a regular basis, maybe they won't make that action. All right. The next reluctant returner we're talking about is people with childcare issues. Again, when someone calls you or you talk to someone about coming back to work and they mention they may have childcare issues, you want to talk through the situation and help them think through the situation. People are stressed right now and they may not be as creative about trying to find solutions. So it's perfectly okay to discuss with them the reasons and the different options they have considered to see if they themselves can be creative so that they can come into work and work for you full time during this time. Or you also want to consider yourself as an employer. What can I creatively do to allow this person to work and still meet some sort of childcare obligation that they have? Can they work remotely? Can they work an intermittent leave? Can they work different hours? Instead of coming back full-time, can they come back part-time? Think through all those things and figure out what you can do to help accommodate this person. Again, keeping in mind that you may be required to do this for more than one employee, and you want to be sure that you show yourself equitable and not discriminatory in the things that you do. If there's no alternative, they may be eligible for expanded FMLA leave. And that is, again, this COVID-19 Act that we'll be talking about a little bit more in detail later in the presentation, but a little bit about that right now. So expanded FMLA leave for childcare reason. It would be unpaid for the first 10 days of leave. They may use accrued PTO during this time. And after 2 weeks, they could get paid 2/3 of an employee's regular pay rate for regular hours. There's caps to this, however, under the legislation that it's $200 maximum per day, or $10,000 in total, or $12,000 in total if using emergency paid sick leave for the first 2 weeks. So again, you want to have a good conversation, get to the root cause, think about solutions, and then what are you required to do due to regulations? All right. I get a lot of questions about this. Employers are really concerned about employees who are unemployment not wanting to come back. As you know, due to COVID-19, the legislatures have brought forth a lot of legislation to help accommodate business owners and help come to their aid, as well as help employees who may have been displaced. And through those efforts, the federal government has given additional unemployment for a specific period of time, which is $600 per week. This has caused some concern with business owners because not everybody, as a employee is making more than $600 a week, and now some employees may be making more on unemployment than they would have for their employer. Certainly a valid concern, and so we're addressing those questions all the time. And again, we want to make sure that we understand where the employee is coming from. So if someone may want to stay on unemployment, you certainly don't want to assume that. Again, employees are not always forthright about every detail as to the reasons why they're not coming back, they're not responding, or they seem reluctant. So you want to have a good conversation with them. Make sure you cover the COVID-19 reasons to see if any of that applies. And then another thing that the leaders have come up with to help combat any abuse with unemployment is that you can report unemployment on behalf of the employee to the Department of Employment Security. And so you can tell your employee, okay, we are going to start to do that for you on your behalf if they are still out and they're still not working for you. And you'll report a file every week of any hours they worked and anybody who is still out and anybody who is being recalled. And so that's a good way to address it as well, because they will be notified when this person is recalled, and then that'll be noted on their file, and they will continue to be able to receive unemployment because employment is now available. We highly recommend to our clients that you put a recall request in writing. You want to share different information like report to work date, and also you want to consider other things. Many people work for their employer because they enjoy the people they work with, they enjoy what they do, they believe in the company. It's a lot more than just a paycheck. So you also want to share with them, we're looking forward to having you back, we've missed you, we've seen clients out and about and they can't wait to see you. So sharing those things will help to kind of bring to mind why they loved working there and how they have missed you, and that it is more than a paycheck. Another thing to also include in your recall letter is penalties of fraud. All of that information is on the unemployment website. You certainly don't want to threaten them, but they may not be aware that there are severe penalties of unemployment fraud. And you also want to mention that your unemployment will be impacted. Also, a good thing to include is your protocols for ensuring their safety. Again, this will help reassure them that you've got your stuff together, you're ready to protect them and work safely with clientele and move forward with the business. If all else fails, move on to hire someone who is more willing to work so they continue to meet the needs of your clients if this person is non-responsive. All right, the next concept we're going to be talking about is engaging and reconnecting with your staff. If your staff has been on layoff or not all working together and working different shifts, working remotely, it's very important that you guys bond together as a work family. And so here's a few tips to do that and to help them feel supported and, again, feel connected to you and your business. So put yourself in your employee's shoes and be empathetic. Again, these are unprecedented times that most people have not experienced before, and everyone is reacting differently and have different concerns. So it's very important that you be there for them. Take a moment, take a breath from working hard in your business to check in with people and be empathetic and understand what they're going through. Most everyone's income has been impacted. Some people's health, people have been stressed, and you want to make sure you provide resources to them. There's some things that you can do, like invite a financial counselor to do a free workshop to help them figure out how to stretch their funds if they've been impacted. Maybe someone in their family is no longer working and has been displaced. Maybe there are health issues and health bills that they're having to deal with because of COVID-19. So having an expert come in and do a workshop is well worth it, as it puts your people's mind at ease and helps them to take action and move forward. Also, stress relief techniques workshop. that would be another option that you could do. If you have an employee assistance program through your benefits, that often they will come and do these things a couple times a year. You can choose different topics, and it's for free, and it's done by an expert and can really show how you're taking care of your staff. Also, you might want to just point them to resources that are available. In this stressful time, not everybody is resourceful as others. Maybe you're more in the loop because you're involved in the chamber of the different things that on resources that are out there. And also just have a conversation and ask how you can help. Also, you want to reconfirm that they're a valued team member. Again, people are a little bit insecure at this time and maybe a little bit more emotional maybe than they were before. So taking the time to reconfirm and tell them how much you appreciate them and they're so glad that they are on your team. Also, one thing to remember, especially if people have been remote or they haven't been working at all within your organization and you're bringing them back, you maybe do a little celebration, have some family time, have some lunch or some breakfast together. Realize that there may be a little bit more chatting throughout the day than may be normal. And that's completely normal and appropriate considering the isolation so many people have been in. And realize that optimum production levels won't magically return immediately and overnight. Allow people some time and some grace as they transition from whatever if they've been working telecommuting and working from home, that's still very different than coming into the office. They had probably more flexibility there than maybe they were used to in the office. Or if they have been not working at all, sometimes it takes a little bit to get motivated and re-ramped up to productive levels. So extend some grace there as well. During this time, you may have made some adjustments to your processes. Maybe there's been some adjustments that have needed to be made because of demands during this time. Make sure you share that information on how that impacts their particular job and set expectations. Also, you need to be available to, make sure you can adjust. If someone comes back and gives you feedback on some of those changes, make sure you take that into account and that their input is valuable. Adjust as needed, and make sure you rally those troops to meet the challenges. So some business owners may say, this sounds like a lot of fluff. Well, I tell you what, it impacts your bottom line. Very important logical reasons behind this, with studies to show that this will help your employees to transition and be effective. Again, uncertain times, people coming from different perspectives. Also, distracted employees are not productive employees. Anything you can do to help them to be less distracted by providing resources, financial counseling and assistance. Financial worries has been a top concern and in the news for years as far as employees, and it's really something that can really derail your employees for being as productive as they need to be. So taking that little time to provide those resources can really help them refocus and become more productive because they feel like they have taken action and taken some control back in these crazy times. Also, again, employees have missed that personal contact. I know people who are outgoing individuals that have been really depressed about not having that contact. So you need to realize that this is a human need and allow for that. Again, people are worried about their jobs and they need reassurance. So just taking a few minutes to do that is really going to go a long way to helping your employees to give their best and dedicate themselves to the recovery and moving forward with your company. Statistics show that staff are loyal to those people who care about them personally and not just their performance. Almost every employer that I work with, I can tell they really care about their employees, but you need to make sure that you're communicating that and that is translating well rather than something that's just kept in your heart. So make sure that you're not just talking about performance. You're checking in with them. How's their family doing? How are they doing? Remembering what's going on in their lives and checking in. So I mentioned before that this is not a bunch of fluff. It's not. It takes 1.5 to 2 times the cost to replace an employee. If someone is worried and they think they could be more secure in a job somewhere else, if they don't feel valued and important, they may move on, and it's costly to replace that person. And also, if nothing else, getting that person trained and up to speed is very time consuming, right? So a key to your success is having a trained team in place that understands your customers, your business is a real key to your recovery. All right, so let's talk about options of bringing back staff. All right, so what we're recommending is that you survey your employees and your customers so you can effectively plan. So when you're planning your return date, if you're closed or you're planning to ramp up or pivot as a company, you want to survey your employees and understand where they're coming from, what their challenges are, and if your timeline meets with what they can do. So it's perfectly appropriate to be checking in with your people, how they're doing, checking again about if they have contracted COVID-19, maybe while they were on layoff, or if they have any symptoms, or if they have been exposed to anyone. You need to ask those important questions. Ask them if they have any challenges to returning work on X date. How are they feeling about the return to work? Are they fearful? Checking in with those things are very important. Another thing that's important as well is checking with your customers. We're recommending to our clients, if you have an email list, that you also survey them as well. There has been some great predictions from leaders about all this pent-up demand for your service. If your service hasn't been readily available, that everybody, once they get the go-ahead, is going to be running out and spending money. And that is fantastic. But you need to make sure that that's appropriate for your industry and your clientele that have you today, that have worked with you before. So doing a survey to them is very appropriate and a good way to plan. If your staff has been remote, you want to check, can you continue to do that? And how often? Is it appropriate to continue to do that? Are you working well in a remote situation? Just because you can reopen, you need to consider what is best for your business and your team, and make your decision on when you feel it's appropriate for you to reopen to the public. Also, you need to keep in mind safety as a top priority. As an employer, this is your duty to keep your employees safe. And critical during these times to take that very seriously and look at best practices. You'll also want to plan how and when employees will return to work, what makes sense, again, for your company, your team, and how comfortable your employees feel with that plan, and how you can be creative and get that done and move forward with your company. Things to consider are phasing in employees, returning to work. You don't have to employ everyone at once. It could be overwhelming. Maybe have people come in at shifts or starting on different days. Maybe it's more critical for you to bring one unit back versus another. When you're considering recalling people, especially when it comes to layoff, you want to make sure that you have a non-discriminatory factors when you're making that selection. It needs to look very objective. Again, this is an emotional time, and when people are emotional, lots of suits come out, and people are trying to find reasons for their situation, and sometimes that results in a suit. So using seniority, or possibly just recalling everyone, or recalling a whole department, or recalling everyone in one position, you want to make sure that you think through any ramifications where it might look discriminatory, so that you can avoid that and make sure that people know that you're being as objective and as fair as you can when you're bringing people back. I also want to determine if schedule changes might be appropriate to provide the greatest protection to workers. Some people work in very close quarters, and maybe social distancing is very difficult. And so maybe it might make sense to do different shifts, and so that people can be more spaced out in your environment and more safe. All right, so we've touched on safety several times, so here's a little bit more detail. We recommend that you create a written safety plan, and you need to address all these items listed here. Social distancing, how are you going to accommodate that? Regular cleaning. Are the employees supposed to be doing the regular cleaning? Do you have the materials that are safe to really clean things well? Is a third party coming in and are they cleaning more often? What are the expectations? Hand washing. Make sure you educate your team about how important that is in preventing the spread of the virus. Are masks appropriate for your organization? Is it recommended for your industry? Uh, Consider taking employee temperatures before entering the office. You don't know where these people have been, and they don't even know how they've been exposed oftentimes because there's such a delay before you see symptoms, right? So taking a temperature is a good protocol that you could do before someone enters the office. One thing though to keep in mind is not all people who have had COVID-19 had a temperature. COVID-19 has affected people in different ways. However, if someone does have a temperature, that indicates that they are probably not well, which comes to our next point is that we require that anyone who is sick, even for a non-COVID-19 reason, should stay home and be symptom-free for up to 48 hours before they return to work. And why is that? It could be any little thing, and it's because when your systems are compromised due to sickness, you may be more susceptible to COVID-19. And if you spread that around your team, then everybody might be more susceptible. And then other people who may have other conditions may contract COVID-19. So we want to make sure that you communicate that with your team. How will they be paid during that time? What's available? Also, you want to consider a COVID-19 certified cleaning. There are professionals out there that have the tools and the training to make sure that the virus is eradicated from your business. And there are great people within the organization of the chamber that's on a directory that can do that for you. Make sure you check into that and see if that is appropriate for your organization and makes sense. My understanding, it doesn't cost a lot and it can never hurt to do something like that to make sure that your team and your clients are as protected as possible. Again, we want to make sure that you have detailed steps should someone get COVID-19 or be exposed to COVID-19. You need to think about this before this happens. You don't want to be thinking about this on the fly. So what we're recommending to our clients is having a dedicated person who is responsible for COVID-19 compliance. So they would be the one who would be notified and enacting the steps should someone get believe they are exposed or get COVID-19. They are also responsible for keeping up to date on the latest on what other requirements and the best practices. As you know, this is a fluid situation and best practices are coming out all the time. The reopening and those requirements have changed and can change, so it's very important that they keep up to date with OSHA guidelines, CDC guidelines, state reopening guidelines, industry recommendations. So super important to do that. What we have seen as a best practice is that if someone has been exposed or someone who has COVID-19, they should quarantine, see a doctor's professional opinion about diagnosis, and be symptom-free for 14 days before they return. Again, check those best practices for your industry on a regular basis, but that's a good guideline to think about. Also, you want to consider limiting the amount of customers and interaction. Can your customers interact with you just as well over the phone or remotely or through Zoom? So there's also requirements from the state about limiting depending on your industry. So you want to check that as well. The Chamber has been working hard to put together a guide from an industry perspective on protocols from a safety perspective. And that should be coming out shortly. They have something in place and they're getting some revisions and some sign-offs on that. And so that's to come. So very important to check with that as well, because all our businesses are different and have different risks. So it's very important to look at that. I've given you a link here to the OSHA guidelines on preparing your workplace. Also, I wanted to call your attention to something that's very recent. The Chamber and area leaders have worked hard to get legislation in place to help limit the liability for those getting COVID-19 in the course of business. So whether that's a customer or that's an employee, it's a very new legislation I believe came out last week that has some guidelines and some possible limitation for employers to be sued. But you want to check with your attorney. I've given a link here from the information that I have received from the Chamber, and just to make sure that you're doing everything you can to limit your liability in these crazy times. All right, recruiting. So first we're going to talk about recruiting compliance, and then we're going to talk about your recruiting strategy. Again, the CDC has declared an imminent threat with COVID-19, so you can do some things that maybe you didn't do before as an employer when you're working through your recruiting process. You can screen job applicants for COVID-19 symptoms after making a conditional offer. So you don't want to ask people during the interview process if they might have a COVID-19 symptoms or they have been exposed. But once you give them an offer, you can start to ask these questions. Also, you can take your applicant's temperature as part of the post screening process. Once an offer is out there, you can take their temperature. Also, you can withdraw a job offer when you need the applicant to start immediately, and maybe they have COVID-19 or symptoms of it. Another thing you can do is delay the start date of an applicant who has COVID-19 or has symptoms. Okay. Your recruiting strategy has changed a lot. We were in a candidate market before COVID-19, and there were so many people who were employed, and employers were having trouble getting people, and that there were people who were available. It's very different times now. It's the opposite. There's lots of people out of work looking for work. We had talked about before that there is a projected pent-up demand for many of the services that have been closed. And so you need to assess that as a company on if that's going to be a temporary demand or you think it's going to be long-term when you're thinking about hiring people to meet the need. I've talked to a couple different clients, and that's their concern, is I want to meet the demand and provide great fast service for this temporary demand, but I don't want to hire somebody full-time long-term if it's not going to last. So some of the things that we're talking to our clients about is consider interns, all those people who have gone to college or maybe off for the summer for whatever reason. Consider employing those people in an internship for a definitive period of time. Also, you can work with maybe gig economy workers. Those people are usually looking to supplement their income. They're not usually looking for long-term work, and they're used to having project assignments. Also look for part-timers. They're typically not looking for a long-term commitment. Maybe they could work off hours. Maybe they could work weekends. You also want to make sure that you have your training and onboarding procedures ready to go so you can get this person up to speed as soon as possible if you need to add to your staff. Also consider, would job sharing be an option? Maybe there's one part of your organization that you anticipate being busier, and then there's another part of the organization may not be as impacted as much. Can you move around some duties so that you can keep the same number of employees and this other person can have additional duties that maybe they've been looking for to learn more about the business and take on more duties to help you succeed. When recruiting for staff, you also want to consider, again, that this is a different candidate market than it was before for recruiting. People are worried about job security. If people are displaced, then they are getting unemployment and getting more unemployment than they were in the past. So they possibly could be choosier. It's hard to tell. But they're certainly going to be top of mind about, is this job going to be secure? Many people who thought their job was very secure and their job was considered non-essential and they were displaced. So I think it's a great opportunity for essential businesses to market and say, hey, during this time we have been busy. This is a career that maybe you haven't considered before. Why don't you consider that? And then look at different parallel markets and industries that might be a good transition and start to market to those people as well. You need to answer questions, those for employers, is how has the company weathered the storm? Has it been status quo? Have you been going gangbusters? We've had challenges, we're overcoming them. We have a plan in place. Is this job a new position and we've never had it before? Is this a new position and long overdue? We needed to hire 2 years ago, but we're finally getting around to doing it. Or this is a position that's truly essential to the operation of our company, so it's pretty secure position. Or is this a temporary position? We're adding this due to temporary demand. We're hoping it's going to be a long-term position. We should know, 60, 90 days when that, how it's going to work out. So important questions to answer during your process and telling people about your company and the opportunity. A great way to do that is have a third-party recruiter be involved. That's something that we do offer to our clients. Happy to discuss if that's something that you need or want in your business as you're looking to add staff during this time. All right, our final point is we're talking about compliance considerations. As we mentioned before, there have been a couple different things that have come out. So there is the Family First Coronavirus Response Act that has been put in place. There's two parts of it. There's Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion, and then there's another one we will talk in just a moment. So this is the first part, and it is for employers who have less than 500 employees. It was effective April 1st, and it's effective through the end of the year. It's for employees who are unable to work or telework due to the need to care for children under the age of 18 if the school or place of care is closed, or a child care provider is unavailable due to public health emergency. So who's eligible for this? Your employees who have been with you at least 30 calendar days would be eligible. There are some exclusions that may be applicable that you could take part in. Is certain healthcare providers and emergency responders can be excluded. Small businesses with less than 50 employees, if the business is in jeopardy, could possibly claim an exclusion. My concern with this is there hasn't been a lot of clarification on how these businesses can get exemption from this, which is concerning to me. So there isn't a way to submit it. They have just said kind of document it and don't submit it. So this is a little bit concerning to me. So I'm recommending to our clients that you comply whenever possible, so that you can mitigate any risk of possibly them not considering it a good business reason and that you really aren't in jeopardy. So how does this work? Is it paid? Yes, but the first 2 days can be unpaid. An employee can use any accrued PTO that their employer offers. The remainder of the leave must be at 2/3 pay of the employee's regular rate of pay, and the paid leave is subject to the limit of $200 per day up to a total of $10,000. So there are limits to it. How much leave can they get? Up to 12 weeks of job protected leave. This doesn't mean that everybody gets 12 weeks. They request what they need and you give them what they need. What this means with the job protected leave is that you need to consider that you are required to hire this person back once the leave is over. So what we're telling our clients is you want to maybe get a temporary staffer to help out. Maybe you reorganize the duties and distribute it between your current staff in order to accommodate, because they will be expected to be placed in the same job with the same pay or a similar job with the same pay under this act to be compliant. All right, the second part of this act is the emergency paid sick leave. Again, it's effective for the same dates, the same covered employers, but now there's 6 reasons someone might be eligible for it. So local quarantine or isolation order, healthcare provider advises that you should self-quarantine, experiencing symptoms and seeking diagnosis, caring for individuals subject to quarantine, caring for a child whose school or child care is closed, or experiencing some similar condition that is similar to COVID-19, which hasn't really been well defined. So the eligibility is different than the other one. You can have an employee on day 1 be eligible for this paid sick leave. So that's important to remember. Again, there are some exceptions for small businesses with less than 50 employees for reasons only 4 through 6. So if someone is quarantined from a healthcare provider or experiencing symptoms or seeking diagnosis, you cannot opt out of that obligation as an employer of 50 or less employees, only for items 4 through 6, which is caring for an individual subject to quarantine and care of a child whose school or child care is closed or experiencing a similar condition. So is it paid? Yes, it's based on the employee's regular compensation, but capped at a maximum of 100% of wages up to $511 per day, for a total of $5,110. And that's for reasons 1 through 3. Let's make it complicated. So it's different payments for different reasons. So that's, again, you're quarantined for an isolation order, a healthcare provider advises you should self-quarantine, you're experiencing symptoms or seeking diagnosis, then you can get up to 100% of wages up to $511 per day. But if you are on reasons 4 through 6, you can get paid 2/3 of wages, up to $200 per day, $2,000 total. Okay? And so for how much leave is available for full-time employees, it's up to 80 hours of paid sick leave. If it's a part-time employee, the average hours worked are over a 2-week period. Okay, so that gives you a high level of the 2 parts of this Corona Response Act that was, again, put together pretty hurriedly, and we're continuing to get a lot of clarification on this. So anytime this comes up with your team, we highly recommend that you consult a professional to make sure that you have the latest and greatest information and best practices to make sure you're compliant and making the best decision for your business and for your employees. So whenever someone may fall into this category of this act that we just discussed, we require that our clients have them request the leaves in writing. We have templates for that we share with our clients so that you can collect all the pertinent information to make a good decision of whether this qualifies, but also to collect information and documentation for the potential tax credits that is available for this act. So you need to be able to document those things in order to get tax credit and share that information with your CPA. Also, I mentioned that this has been a fluid process, that this act was put together in a rather hurry, and there's continued guidance out all the time. If you look at the frequently asked questions online, there are more than 80 questions. That's right, 80 questions that I have out here for frequently asked questions. So lots of guidance still coming out about what this means. When it was first brought out, lots of questions Well-meaning people have put this thing together to help come to the aid of people, but sometimes they don't always have all the hands-on, and lots of questions continue to come in and clarifications. So it's really a perfect storm of compliance. So again, you should seek a professional to make sure. So even if they don't qualify for the first Coronavirus Response Act, do they qualify for accommodations with Americans with Disability Act? Do they qualify for Family Medical Leave Act protection? So lots of things to consider. So highly recommend you don't go it alone. There's lots of resources out there to help you make these good decisions to protect your business. One thing also to keep in mind is any diagnosis and testing results, you should be keeping those things private. Even taking temperatures and things like that, they should be kept separately from your performance files. Also, you need to remember, as far as with COVID-19, you have disclosure requirements. If someone on your team or a customer or someone gets COVID-19 or says that they have been exposed, there certainly are requirements as far as protecting your customers and your team and disclosing some information to them that there has been an exposure. But what and how you do that varies from state to state. And so you need to make sure you consult with an attorney should this come up. So my understanding in North Carolina that you are required to tell your team if someone has been exposed to COVID-19, but you cannot tell them who has been exposed or diagnosed without that person's permission. Very important that you work closely with your attorney during that time so that you can take the best steps with the best information to protect your team and disclose the information that is permitted. Also, you need to educate your team about this act that we went over and what is covered and what is not. We have a link here to the poster that you can share with your team. If your people are still remote, you should email it to them and make sure and have conversations to make sure people understand it. It is a requirement to share this information so they can request this type of leave should they need it. So if you have hired somebody while working remotely, there was a temporary relief that you could look at that virtually. Now they're requiring, should you return to work and someone has been hired remotely, you need to look at that documentation they provided as proof for their I-9 documentation, make sure that everything is in order. All right, well, those are the things that I plan to cover today. I hope you found this helpful. I wanted to kick it over to Allison to see if we have any questions today.
Thank you, Kim. Actually, it does not look like we have any questions in the chat box. If anybody has one, feel free to put them in there now. Otherwise, you can see Kim's contact information is there on the screen for you. We are going to be sending out the slides and a recording. So if there was something that you wanted to re-reference, you can certainly do that. Also, Kim, I know, is happy to talk with anybody anytime about any of this information. So we thank you all for joining us today and appreciate your time. And hopefully we'll all get to see you in person very soon.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity, and we're here to help. Questions here and there, we're happy to answer and help you make your best decision for your business.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.